الله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره. This is our final session in this series on contemporary issues in Islamic thought, and the issue that we want to study today is the relation between reason and faith, or reason and religion. This is a very important issue, and in philosophy of religion, one of the topics which you always find, and in every book on philosophy of religion, there is at least one chapter on this issue about rationality in respect to religious studies. The question is not that whether we can use reason or not, whether we are justified in using reason or not, because I don't think there would be any person who can totally reject use of reason. The main question, as some people have put it, and I agree with them, is whether you need support of reason for your faith or not. In other words, the question is whether my religious belief needs to be rationally justified or not. This is the main question. There are people who believe that you don't need to have rational support or rational justification for your faith. Especially among the Christians, this idea is very popular. They believe that because of the original sin, the sin which is committed by Adam, our reason suffers. Still, our human reason is suffering. And the cost of this original sin for us that has been that we cannot understand properly by our reason. So for these people, not only you don't need to first be rationally convinced, then you believe. Not only they don't want this from you, but even they say, some of them, not all of them, they say that indeed the whole point in being faithful is to believe in something which is rationally not acceptable. And there is a special example that some people use, very famous example. They say that, for example, if you are invited to a kind of feast celebration, and then you are going there, and it's a very big house with lots of playgrounds, pool, greeneries, everything. Then when the night comes, you want to go to the pool, the swimming pool inside the house. And it's very dark. The last time you went to this house, it was empty. The pool was empty. Because, for example, it was winter. Okay, they made it empty. But now it's summer, it's hot, and you want to dive and swim and enjoy water. But you are not sure. You think that maybe they haven't put water. Maybe it's under construction or repair. So you are not 100% sure. There is really a chance that still the pool may be empty. They say, if you are rational, you must make sure that first the pool is full of water and then you dive. But if you are faithful, you must take risk. You must go and jump without asking. So to be faithful means you must be able to take risk. Of course, when you take the risk and believe, then gradually you become convinced. And this is the famous thing which was put forward by, I think it was St. Augustine, that believe and then you know. So first believe, then you will start knowing that this is true. What was the reason for this? I don't want to mention because it takes lots of time, and I refer to some of the reasons when we talked about the issue of secularism, that how the teachings of religion, especially the teachings of the church, was questioned by modern philosophers and also by modern scientists, because some of the teachings were also questioned by the scientists. And then people started questioning the arguments for faith, in particular Christian faith, but even some of them went further and questioned all faith. They questioned the existence of God. They said none of these arguments work. So they tried to undermine the rational basis of faith. So as a result, as a reaction, what some faithful people did was to say that, who said we need your support? Who said we need the rational support? It's not important for us. Whether you say there is argument for example, existence of God or not, it doesn't bother me. Indeed, maybe to make them more angry, they said, indeed, because there is no argument, I believe in God. I believe in religions. Maybe it was also some kind of overreaction. But that's a big discussion, and I don't want to go into that discussion. This was basically the idea that you don't need to have rational support for your faith, or even further, even if you have conflict with the reason, there is no problem. You may have all have had experience of discussing with Christian friends about Trinity. And with all the respect that we have for our Christian friends, when it comes to the issue of Trinity, we have problem in understanding, because rationally it doesn't make any sense unless they make it, somehow symbolic. For example, they say, it's only one God, but God has different manifestations. So when we say God is three, we really don't mean that God is three. We mean God has different manifestations. But many of them insist that, no, really there are three persons. When we talk with our Christian friends, something that I normally don't do, because I know that this is not something that we can rationally come to an agreement. So normally I don't discuss with our Christian friends about this, but sometimes, discussion arises. So, or there are people who want to know our understanding, so we should share with them. After some discussion, then in the end, when there is end of argument, they say, look, this is a mystery. This is a mystery, and we should believe in this, and we know that this is not rationally understandable. But this is part of the faith. This is very typical answer that you hear from top Christian scholars, the people who have really faith, people who are serious in their life. It's not they just want to escape from discussion. No, this is really their commitment, that there are mysterious things, and this is one of them. So the main question here is, do we need rational support, rational justification for our faith in general and our beliefs in particular? For example, to be a Muslim or to believe in certain aspects of Islam. Do we need rational support or not? This is the main question. There are also other questions. For example, is it possible that by development in rational or intellectual sciences, by development in experimental sciences, we may come to a stage in which we no longer need revelation? In other words, is it possible that reason may replace revelation? Obviously, in the past, there was need for guidance from religious people, from prophets, from religious leaders, from scripture. But some people, even sometimes some religious people, they think that gradually the role of religion is in decrease. Why? Because now we are developing in our sciences. Now we can understand many things ourselves, so we don't need anymore religion to come and teach us what to do. Many things can be achieved through sciences or through philosophy and so on and so forth. So this is another issue which is this, not as important as the first issue, but it's still important. That is it possible to think that reason may replace revelation or not? To be able to answer this question, we need to see what is Islamic understanding of reason, of human intellect. 2 years ago, we had our conference with the Catholics on reason and faith. And here, Catholics are very much closer to us, the Shia, when it comes to reason. They have great faith in reason. Of course, still they are not like us, because still they believe in original sin, and that original sin has affected human reason. So they are not as optimistic as we are. But they are very much in favor of reason. And the Pope, the previous Pope, John Paul II, had an encyclical letter about faith and reason. And because he himself was also a philosopher, when you read that, you find it very similar to our position about reason. In this volume, A Catholic Shia Engagement, Faith and Reason in Theory and Practice, you find papers from the Shia and from the Catholic scholars on reason and faith and their relation. I have a paper here, and I want to share with you some of the ideas of this paper. Unfortunately, I couldn't photocopy for you, but I'm sure you have access to this book. And before I talk about the paper, I would like to mention something from someone who commented on the Shia position, and that is a lady who is a lecturer in the Catholic University of Washington. And she wrote a kind of paper summarizing all the papers and putting, the papers in a kind of order. And she says that as I began to read the outstanding paper by Dr. Mohammad Shomali of the Imam Khomeini Educational Research Institute of Qom, entitled Reason, Faith and Authority, a Shiite Perspective, I speedily realized that there is no major difference between Catholic and Shiite beliefs on the relationship between reason and faith. So This was the idea. And then he goes on about my discussion about the authority. So she finds it very similar to their position. Of course, as I said, there are some differences, and I think we are more optimistic about reason. Very briefly, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two ways of communication to us. In other words, there are two ways to understand the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is reason, aql, and second is revelation. This idea is something you find it in many hadiths, especially in the school of Ahlul Bayt. Inna lillahi ta'ala ala nas hujjatain. Hujjatan zahira wa hujjatan batina. Truly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two ways of communication, two hujjah. Hujjah means something through which you can understand will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe a person, maybe a book, anything that helps you to understand what Allah wants from you. Hujjatun zahira, the external hujjah, the external way of communicating is through prophets. Hujjatan zahira wa humul anbiya. The prophets are the external way of communicating to us. And then the internal way of communicating to us is al-aql. Hujjatan batina wa hiya al-aql. Aql, or reason or intellect, to be more precisely intellect, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given every human being. And through that, Allah communicates to us. Even you find this expression in many Shia sources that the prophets are external aql. The prophets are external intellect. So if it was possible to embody reason outside, to crystallize reason outside, it would take a form of a prophet. And intellect is internalized prophet. If there is any part of our being which can echo the voice of the Prophet Mohammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, or the Prophet Abraham, or the Prophet Musa, or Isa, Jesus, that would be our reason. You see how much faith, how much respect, how much honor we have for reason. We say that it is an internalized prophet. Nothing inside human being is as trusted as reason. Of course, we believe in conscience. But human conscience must always be checked against reason and revelation. Why? Because human conscience is subject to change, is subject to alteration. Sometimes people disregard the voice of their conscience. So this voice becomes very weak and weak. So they don't feel anything bad. Or even sometimes they insist on doing mischief so that they start enjoying bad things. Not only they don't feel anything bad in their conscience, even they find it very enjoyable. They kill people and they enjoy. They torture people and they enjoy. They annoy people and then they laugh. They ridicule people and they enjoy. Why? Because their conscience is changed. You remember once I had this story for you about the people who were selling perfumes, the market of the perfume sellers, and that a horse came and made the dirty. And they wanted someone to clean, but they couldn't, because they couldn't tolerate the bad, smell. So they brought someone who works in a stable so that he cleans the market. But as soon as that person entered this market, went unconscious. Why? Because he was not used to the fragrance of perfumes. This shows that human conscience is subject to change. So you cannot say, refer to your heart, refer to your conscience without any condition. Why? Because sometimes people refer to their heart and they find endorsement for bad things. They refer to their conscience and their conscience tells them to do bad things. Yes, if a human being is in the situation that God has created, with the God-given nature, with the default nature, then that's okay. You can refer to your conscience and see whether you have approval or not. As we have hadith that someone asked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about what is good, what is bad. Indeed, before he asked, the Prophet told him his question. And the Prophet said, refer to your heart. Whatever disturbs your heart is bad. Whatever brings tranquility and peace to your heart is good. Or in another hadith we have istafta qalbak, make inquiry, but you don't need to inquire a person outside you. Inquire your heart, and your heart will tell you what is the answer. But this is for the people who are in the original and in the default situation, not the people who have distorted their conscience. So this is why we say conscience must be always checked against reason and revelation. It's only reason which has been fully accepted, which has been fully verified in Islam. Whatever judgment is made by reason, the same is made by revelation, by religion, whether the Quran or Sunnah. When we say revelation, it means the Quran and the explanation of that comes in Sunnah. You know this famous rule of what they call it qa'idatul mulazama, the rule of co-implication or correlation between reason and religion. كلما حكم به العقل حكم به الشرع وكلما حكم به الشرع حكم به العقل. Whatever judgment is made by reason, the same is made by religion. Whatever judgment is made by religion, the same is made by reason. There is no conflict at all. Absolute harmony. The only thing which must be careful is really to make sure that this is the judgment of reason. So there must be a decisive, rational judgment. Not that everyone, brings his own opinions and say this is the rational judgment. Sometimes, just people think that their guess and suspicions are rational arguments. No, this is not rational argument. Rational argument must be able to stand for a very critical, objective assessment. It must be methodologically verified. So something that you can present to the scholars, to the philosophers, to the people who know logic, and they can tell you that, okay, this was the first step, second step, third step of your judgment, and then they can tell you that is okay or not. Of course, you don't need people to tell you. Logic is created here, also, so that you can yourself understand. But just, you need to be checking with other people as well. Because sometimes our mistakes remain hidden for us. So, something which is rational must always be able to be communicated first and verified by rational people. Not all people. You don't need to make sure that everyone accepts. No. But at least people who are familiar with the procedure of rational argumentation, they should be able to tell you that, okay, this is something that we understand and this is something that we accept. So we must be very careful that we don't think that every judgment that we make is rational. No, many of our judgments are not rational. For example, in many cases, look at people. Look at the way people argue. Listen to their arguments. In many cases, they accept things just because they are new. Or they reject things because they are new. In many cases, you find people, they oppose things which are new, or they just accept things which are new. Normally, the youths accept the things which are very new. They think something which is new, something which is modern, must be good. And the old people normally reject the things which are new because they think everything which is old is good. And none of these two are okay. Neither being good nor being old is a sufficient proof. But you find many people, think that this is really a proof. Or sometimes people, in many cases, people think what majority says is true. But this is not rational. There is no rational argument which says what majority says is true, or what minority says is wrong. Indeed, I personally believe that when it comes to very deep questions, very difficult questions, I think the chance of minority being right is always higher when it comes to difficult questions. Because the majority are the average. And the people who are very top in their understanding cannot be majority. So I am not surprised if a true faith is endorsed or adopted by a minority. Indeed, I think that this is quite understandable. Anyway, to be minority or majority is not a reason, is not a proof. So, when I say whatever rational judgment we make is supported by religion, I mean really rational, decisive rational judgment, not opinions of people or, fallistic arguments. So, absolute harmony. Just recently, I was giving a talk for an interfaith meeting. And I told them that since my entrance to the seminary, even before that, I was always interested in two things. One was philosophy, and second was spirituality. And these were my two main reasons to go to the seminary of Qom and devote my life to learning Islamic sciences. I always studied philosophy and also spirituality. Of course, I studied other subjects, but these two were my main interest because of two reasons. One was that I knew that I need to be able to rationally support my idea. I remember there were some days, actually there were some months, that I was thinking whether I am really a believer or not. When I was, about 16, 17 years old, 15 years, 16, 17, I was in doubt whether I am really a believer or not. I was praying, I was fasting, but at the same time, I was telling myself, what is your proof that your religion is true? What is your proof that God exists? And because, I knew that as a Muslim, I am required to be able to have argument for myself. I cannot just follow my parents or, my community. So I used to read all the books which was available to me about existence of God. And I put my cupboard full of books in Farsi. I didn't know at that time Arabic or English. I had Farsi just as my only language. So to buy every book about existence of God. So I was trying to find answer for me. And then sometime, I had questions. I didn't have also that many people who could be asked. And then I told myself that I have to go to the seminary and study fully this subject of theology and philosophy so that I can be really convinced. But At the same time, it was very clear for me that real conviction and real faith can come through spirituality. I knew that philosophically I can improve, but to be able to really feel united and, close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through spirituality. So I always try to follow these two, and I didn't achieve anything, but at least I can say that I changed all my life and, went to Qom and spend my life for these two things. This is not a story that you may say, okay, it's not important. No, I think it's very important because this shows that in our understanding, if you want to be a good person, a good mu'min, you don't need to ignore reason. You don't need to ignore philosophy or rational, discussions. But at the same time, you should know that everything cannot be summarized in that. You need to also worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to make some efforts to purify your soul. Because the real certainty comes when your both mind and heart find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only your mind and not only your heart. Many of our Christian friends try to reach God through their hearts. As I explained, they think that it's not important that mentally you are convinced or not. Even if there is a mystery, no problem. There are people who think that everything can be mentally sorted out. But we believe, and I still believe, although at that time I did this maybe very naively, and I was just, listening to the lectures of ulama and reading books, and I decided this for myself. But still after, how many years? After 26 years that I made decision to go to Qom, still I have the firm belief that you need to be mentally and spiritually convinced. This is the good sign. If someone is mentally convinced and spiritually convinced, that is the best way of getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very beautiful that the Quran says, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that you achieve certainty. Some people, of course, say this here certainty means death, means worship till death. But no, this is not death. Death is sometimes referred to as certainty. But certainty is something different from death. When we die, we become, of course, certain, but it doesn't mean certainty means death. If we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after being mentally convinced, then we can achieve true certainty. A true certainty. Not a certainty that you know something, but you don't find it that much important. Sometimes we know something is true, but we don't pay attention. We know something is harmful, but we disregard our knowledge. Like, famous example of medical doctors who smoke. This type of certainty is useless. That you know something is harmful and still you smoke. What kind of certainty we need? We need a type of certainty which always is accompanied by practice. And that is haqqul yaqeen. Not certainty of a person in his mind. Certainty of a person in all aspects of its being. The mind is convinced, the heart is convinced. Like what? For example, when someone dies, we all know that this person cannot do anything to us. Okay? If there is a dead body here. Maybe he was, even, for example, a very close relative or friend of us, and there is no chance that he may wrong us. But many people are very much frightened to sleep in a room in which a dead body is there, for example, waiting for burial. They think that something may happen. Or for example, when we go to, in the night, if you go to a dark place or to a cemetery, it's very frightening. Why? We know that there is nothing happening, but our heart is not convinced. We need certainty of heart. This is very important. And that comes with worship. In one of the du'as that we have for the months of Rajab, which we should daily recite, we have Allahumma inni as'aluka sabra ash-shakirina lak wa amal al-khaifina mink wa yaqeen al-'abidina lak. Oh Allah, I want from you the patience of the people who are thankful. It's a very beautiful patience. Patience of the people who are thankful. So that they know if there is any problem, if there is any suffering, any pain involved, it's to their benefit and to their interest. They don't complain. They enjoy. Sabra shakirina like. And you remember that when Imam Ali was told by the Prophet that how would be your patience when you are martyred and your beard will be covered with your blood, Imam Ali said, this is the place for thankfulness. This is place for shukr. So, I ask you the patience of the people who are thankful, the practice of the people who are God-fearing, because without having fear, you will not make movement. And thirdly, وَيَقِينَ الْعَابِدِينَ لَكَ. I want the certainty of the people who worship you. This is very much inspired by the ayah that I recited. وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. We need certainty of the people who worship. This type of certainty is important. And if someone doesn't worship properly, and I mean by worship, devotion and dedication, not just, 5 times prayer and that's it. If we don't worship Allah properly, gradually our faith becomes weaker and weaker. Even if you may have full rational support. ثُمَّ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ أَسَاءُوا السُّوءَ أَنْ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ. The fate, the end for the people who did mischief and wrong actions was that finally they denied all the signs of Allah and they ridiculed them. This is what Lady Zainab recited for Yazid or for Omar Sa'd. That because you have been doing all these sins, so finally you lost your faith. So, let me go back to my topic. So we need to be rationally convinced. We need to be rationally satisfied. But we should know that this is not the only thing which matters. Along with that, we should also worship. We should have devotion and a spiritual uplifting. I just try to summarize some of the roles of reason and finish, because today we are going to have a second presentation. Very briefly, we can sum up the role of reason in the following. First, it is reason or intellect that motivates us to study religion, to study claims made by prophets. It's reason. Someone comes and he says, I am a prophet, I am a messenger from God. And I have brought you something that can save you, that can make you prosper in this world and the hereafter, why should I listen to this person? Why should I bother make inquiry? You may say that this person says you must make inquiry. But this is to beg the question. Who said he is in the first place that he is from God? And this is the mentality of many people. Many people think that let us not do any inquiry about religions, because then we may come to the conclusion that these religions are true. Maybe Islam is true. So let us forget thinking about it. And they think that this is a protection. But this is not a protection. This is just deceiving ourselves. Our reason tells us that you must take this seriously. Because if, of course, this is if in the beginning. But if this is true, the effect that it has on your life is infinite. If religion which is brought to you by this person is true message of God, then by following that you would achieve happiness. And by ignoring that you would suffer endlessly. So my reason says, at least for the sake of probability, you must make inquiry. And if you don't listen, if you don't take it seriously, you must blame yourself. Okay? So this is reason that motivate us. And there are other also rational arguments, like for example the need to be thankful. But I just mentioned the argument from probability. Second, okay, now I am motivated. Now there is a prophet who says I am from God, or in our time we don't have chance of being able to be with the prophet, but we have the Quran, we have the Bible, we have different books, different ideas. Okay, now I must make inquiry. But please don't take this, something simple. Unfortunately, out of these 6 billion of people who live in the world, how many of them are devoting their at least few months of their life to study what is the true religion? Many of people just, ignore it. And, maybe about 1/3 or less of the people of the world are atheists. And many of these people, it's not because they are convinced that there is no religion. It's just, they don't want to listen about it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to study about it. Okay. So the first rational step is to make inquiry. Second, when I am faced with the Quran, for example, how can I understand that this is from God? This is true. You tell me, how can I understand? I cannot say Quran says this is a book from God. If I say the Quran says so, you will tell me that this is to beg the question. If you tell me that, okay, you believe in the Quran and then you would come to know. The Christian friends, may say this. But this is not rationally convincing. We cannot say like Saint Augustine, believe and then you know. No. We believe that we must know and then believe. We cannot believe and then know. Because then everything, would endorse, even may endorse strange ideas. After, so much thinking about them and, living according to some ideas, then they say, okay, this is true. So, before getting emotionally attached to your religion, you must make rational inquiry about that. So, this is the Quran, for example. This is the Bible. This is any message. This is Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever. How can I find out the truth? I cannot say they say we are true. This is to beg the question. I cannot say that this is more favorite to me because, for example, this is something coming from my own country or from my own continent. Or on the other hand, there are people nowadays, many Western people, they enjoy Eastern religions. And the main reason is because it's new for them. They want something new. They want some excitement. They go for example, Buddhism. Why? Because, they find it something new. Like, some people try, for example, Indian food. So some people say, let's try Indian religion. Just that. And they say, oh, it's good, it's hot and, exciting. This is not the way that a rational person can do. We must have rational assessment. And it's only reason. Even I don't accept if you tell me that, look at your heart. In your heart you find Islam is true. Because as I said, okay, some people say in our heart we find Islam is wrong. So what I tell them? Because heart is subject to change, as I said. Our practice, our morality can damage our hearts. And heart must be always checked against reason and revelation. So, the only thing which we have is reason. You must be convinced. So, reason tells us to make a study. Second, reason helps us to find out what is the true religion. And thirdly, when you want to know about your true religion, in our case we believe Islam is true religion. Okay, how we know Islam? This is the third step. How you know Quran? Certainly you must use your reason. If you don't use your reason, then you come up with very funny understanding, strange understandings. Some people refer to the Quran because they don't use their reason. They come up with very strange ideas. We must always understand the Quran in the light of Quran itself, in the light of Sunnah of the Prophet, and in the light of reason. Otherwise, we may misuse Quran. Just, an example, a historical example, something which was very much debated was the issue of visibility of God. Can we see God? And some Muslims, the Ash'arites, who still have great following, people like Ghazali, they have the idea that it's possible to see God by physical eyes. Some of them say it doesn't happen in this world, but it happens in the hereafter. Some of them say it's even possible in this world. Then they argue from the Quran. It's very interesting. They argue from the Quran. What is their argument? They say the people of the time of Prophet Musa told him, Arinallaha jahra. Show us your God clearly so that we can see your God. Then, because of their pressure, the Prophet Musa told, Rabbi arani anzur ilayk. My Lord, show me yourself so that I can look at you. Then these people say, look, if it was not possible to see Allah and look at Allah by your eyes, the Prophet Musa would not have asked him. The fact that he asked means it is possible. Of course, it was not beneficial, but it was possible. Then we tell them, why you don't look at the ending of the verse? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Lan tarani ya Musa. And you will never see me. They said, yes, it means you will never see me in this world. In the hereafter you can see me. وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. There are faces that look at their Lord in Akhirah. And they think that this is with physical eyes. So, whatever you tell them the Quran says that لَا تَرَاهُ الْأَبْصَارِ the physical eyes cannot see him, they bring something else. You know, it's very funny that this verse, which is very clear that no one can see God, and God says, you know, if you look at the mount, and the mount is stable, then you can see me. And then he made a little manifestation, and the mount was made into pieces. فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ جَعَلَهُ دَكًّا وَخَرَّ مُوسَى صَعِقًا. Still they say you can see God by your eyes. Why? Because they don't refer to the Quran? No, they differ. They don't refer to the Sunnah? No, they refer to the Sunnah. They say we are the people of Sunnah. So what is the problem? They don't use reason. So, when it comes to understanding of our religion, we must also use our reason. Then, another role of reason is, through reason we can understand basic moral values. This is the famous question of whether goodness and badness are rational or not, whether they are intrinsic or not, and the issue of divine command theory. I don't want to go into details. Just basically our idea is that we believe whether you are a religious person or not, you can understand at least basic moral values through your reason. You don't need to be a Muslim to understand that honesty is good. You don't need to be Christian to understand honesty is good. Even if you are atheist, you can understand that. You can understand that betraying people, beating innocent people is bad. And this is something which is understandable by all people. This is an important discussion. I don't want to go into details because time is very short. So basic moral values can be understood by religion. And also when it comes to Islamic law, we believe that there is a great role to play by reason. This is why one of our sources, one of major sources of Shia, even in respect to fiqh, is reason. We say the book of Allah, the Sunnah, reason and consensus. Consensus goes back to Sunnah because we believe consensus of people as such is not a proof. If we can discover through the agreement of people the view of the Prophet or Ma'soom, infallible, that's okay. So we have Quran and Sunnah and reason. So there are many questions in fiqh, that our ulama, our jurists, refer to reason. Because there is no clear Quranic teaching or clear hadith. So they refer to reason. It's very obvious. For example, let me give you an example. One of the rulings that we have is the rule of tazahum, the rule of conflict. When there are two religious rulings conflicting each other, what should we do? For example, someone is dying in the next house, which is, for example, your neighbor's house. His child is dying. Okay? And then there is no one to help him, to save him. So you have Islamically the obligation to go and save this innocent person. Okay? It's clear. In Islam, we must save innocent life. But on the other hand, my neighbor is not there so that I can take permission to go into his premises. From Islamic point of view, and also by law, you cannot enter into the premises of other people without their consent. So there are two rulings in conflict. Either I should respect the ruling which says you must save the life, or I should respect the ruling which says you must not enter into the house of your neighbor without the consent of the neighbor. What should I do? It's very important that we follow what is more important. We give preference to what is more important. You don't need to refer to the Quran. You don't need to refer to the Sunnah. Just you use your aql. And your aql says in such cases, certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to save the life. Because life of a human person is much more important than the property of another person. This is aql. But look at what happened, in some of the Islamic countries, I don't want to mention. When the school was being burnt and innocent girls were inside the school, the firemen didn't let anyone to go into the school because they didn't have hijab. And some people were killed. Okay, why? Don't they know Quran? They know. Maybe they memorize Quran. They don't know Sunnah. They know Sunnah. So what is lacking here? So when it comes even to Islamic law, we believe that reason or intellect is something which is a source. Of course, it's not the role of any person, unqualified person, to say this is what reason says, this is what Quran says. No. People who are qualified, people who are knowledgeable, people who are learned, people who know what are the requirements for rational argument, they can refer to reason. Whatever judgment the reason makes, we accept it religiously. This is very important. We accept it religiously. If I was in the case of those people, I would say religiously, Islamically, you must go and save these people, even if they don't have hijab. Islamically, not only rationally. Islamically, you must go. And if you don't go, you have committed a sin. Yeah. So here we take rational judgment to be a religious judgment, as we said, كُلَّمَا حَكَمَ بِهِ الْعَقْلِ حَكَمَ بِهِ الشَّرْعِ. The last point is that there may be cases in which we cannot understand rationally the reason behind a certain ruling. This is the final point. There may be cases in Islam or in any other religion that I cannot rationally understand the reason behind this ruling. What is the point? For example, we are told to say 2 rak'ah prayer in the morning. Why not 3? Why not 1? If we discussed for thousands of years, I don't think any of us can convince the other that why it is 2, not 1 nor 3. Okay? Does it make any problem? No. Because this is something for which we don't have a judgment from reason against our faith. Just faith is saying something and our reason is silent. Okay? I cannot understand from reason. And this has many similar examples in our life. There are many things that you know through rational thinking, but there are also other things you know through your perception. For example, how many people are in this room? You can look and count. But you cannot close your eyes and think. And by thinking and philosophical argument, prove that there must be 20 people here. So, if you close your eyes, or for example, if someone is blind, and we tell him there are 20 people, for example, 30 people, 40 people, okay? This is something that he can accept if he trusts us. And this is not against reason. Because as I said, we don't expect reason to give answer for everything. But if we tell him that there are 10,000 people in this room, this is against reason. This is rationally impossible. because we know the capacity of the room and we know how much space if each person occupies. So it's impossible to have 1,000 or 10,000 people in this room. Okay? But to accept that there are 20, 30 people, it's quite compatible with reason and acceptable. Even if you cannot rationally understand that how many people are here. So there is a difference between believing in something which is against reason and believing in something for which we don't have rational explanation. We don't accept the first. We don't accept anything against reason. But we accept that there are many things that we have learned through reliable sources for which reason has no decisive saying. Why, for example, the meat of pig is haram? Just an example. You may try to rationally convince me and say, there are some scientific evidence. Some people may accept, some people may not. But I say that I have learned this from a reliable source. And I don't find any rational problem in that. That certain meat may be not okay for me. Can you prove rationally that I must eat meat of pig? Can you prove philosophically that I must eat this? No. So, as long as there is a space, a vacuum here for reason, you can refer to reliable sources, the people that you trust. So this is not against reason. This is fully rational. A rational person use all the reliable sources. Okay, I think I stop here. And I hope that in the series that we have had, we were able to address some of the important aspects of Islamic thought in our contemporary time. But I'm sure there are many more topics, but we had just, 8 weeks. So inshallah, you yourself, later study and, or maybe inshallah in the other course which come, those will be covered. I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq, for the blessing that He has given us to be able to meet and discuss.